Where do I begin to tell you all this story? And how should I tell it to you? Oh, God. Well, maybe I'll begin with a bird. Because a pigeon came to my window this morning, and when I got up to take a closer look, it flew off, just like that. You see, it was free to be itself. But as I look around me, I see young people trapped. And my own daughter Stephanie trapped with them. If only they could fly to freedom.
Baby, don't feel inferior. Don't get scared of the world's exterior. Baby, don't be afraid to cry. Baby, lift your head to the sky. 'Cause have you seen old Pigeon fly? Like a pigeon, baby, you could be free. Say, have you seen old Pigeon fly? Like a pigeon, baby, you could be free.
So let me take you back to where this whole thing began. At 3:06 p.m. on March 15th, during my 19th year, my parents were killed in a car accident, and I went into severe depression for 2.5 years. You could say, at my very lowest point, I did consider suicide. As I was about to, go through with it, I heard a voice inside me scream, "You need to grieve the death of your parents." Which is what my psychiatrist had been saying all along. Maybe she got through to me at a critical moment. But whichever way you look at it, that moment was the catalyst for my grief journey, beginning with 8 years of ongoing therapy. You see, my mother had been a professor of psychiatry, so following in her footsteps, I took a psychology degree. I became obsessed with the topic of what happens when you lose someone you love. I read hundreds of books and research theses on the subject, and I expanded my study into post-traumatic stress disorder for my PhD, and I went on to develop a book called The Perpetual Grieving Method, which took off like wildfire. Culmination of my work was becoming an emeritus professor. I had millions of followers all around the world applying my theory to their daily lives. You see, grief is always with us, and as long as that is the case, we need to be constantly grieving. It's when we don't do that we get ourselves into deep trouble. For 10 years, I had been employed by the UN to promote mental health, which took me all around the world. And then the unthinkable, the unimaginable happened. In 2091, something was to irrevocably change the course of life as we knew it. The subterranean, unconscious, cataclysmic mind event took me somewhere I'd never been before. I could not cry anymore. I was not alone. By billions of people. While there is conjecture as to the precise moment the world stopped crying, it was unanimous. It occurred sometime on the 3rd of April, 2091. It became known as the second catastrophe. The first catastrophe was the intolerable blistering heat, forcing many of us to wear anti-searing uniforms and to spend most of our daylight hours indoors. So not being able to cry, therefore, compounded our suffering. I never before had I comprehended with such stark clarity what I had lost. A glorious jewel had been sitting among my unconscious paraphernalia year in and year out. It didn't boast its power. It did not display itself in the marketplace. It went quietly about its business of helping me get through all sorts of tragedies and tribulations. It occasionally helped me laugh. Crying helped me laugh. I had weighty and vast implications before me, extremely difficult to articulate or correlate into some semblance of a body of analysis. After the world stopped crying, I was called a fake by many who had adhered to my concepts. Crying and grief go hand in hand, and therefore some people who had followed my principles in the past were bitterly disappointed they had lost the ability to cry. They believed the exercises I encouraged them to do should have diverted them from the tragedy. While not everyone cries who grieves, it is certainly a significant part of the process for many. The fact that people felt let down by me began to make me feel like a complete failure, and I did not know how to answer their criticisms, especially when they were so hurt. The perpetual grieving method didn't save them. Why? Why hadn't it worked? I would have thought that my grief work would help keep us close to our emotions. I had devoted everything to this project, and the humiliation I was feeling became unbearable. People who had put their trust in me deserted the movement in droves, and I had no one to blame but me. I went into a kind of a black hole, which was unlike anything I'd ever encountered in my lifetime. It was an uncanny emptiness, devoid of anything I could recognize as human. I could not be consoled. I had entered the graveyard of my imagination, where ghosts of the past came back to haunt me and horrors rose up to devour. I had to run away from the deep down secret that I was a failure, and this was too hard to bear. I didn't want people to see my turmoil, so I did everything I could to conceal what was going on inside me.
I've got skeletons in my closet, dark secrets that I try to hide. They're buried deep in the cemetery of my mind, the cemetery of my mind. I do the best to ignore the facts. I do my best to cover my tracks. I'll do the best to lead you blind away from the cemetery of my mind, from the cemetery of my mind.
As I contemplated the enormity of the loss of crying for the whole of humanity, a familiar thought drifted into my consciousness. Life was still, at its core, a pilgrimage where we need to learn things, deep things, and nothing can change that. We do things in our lives, and we look back at them and question why we're so stupid and foolish, or on the other hand, so proud and satisfied about what we'd achieved. And sometimes we learn, and sometimes we never learn, and sometimes we didn't even see we needed to learn anything about anything anyway. We judge people when we ourselves are responsible for our own foolishness. And then there's this mysterious thing called love we rarely engage with, but we know we want real bad. We know the joy when we're accepted as we are by someone else, and it feels good from our head to our toes. And we want more of it if we can get our hands on it. And we know we've got to give love to someone else sometime. It's critical for us to give love when it's needed. Otherwise, people suffer from our resistance to loving them and loving love for that matter. So, the pilgrimage of life invites us to be hospitable to those close to us and those far away. It asks us to give water to the thirsty, food to the hungry, welcome to the stranger, clothes to the naked, healing to the sick, and liberation to the prisoner. But it takes a lifetime to learn that raw material. If life on earth was divided up into 13-year blocks, how many lessons could you write down that exist in those times and phases and years and months and minutes and even seconds? Life is a journey, my friends.
I regret the times that I just, when I looked at people and I recklessly criticized. How can I grow in love when these things I keep inside? Life's a journey, each step a challenge to live. Life's a lesson in learning to give a little bit more.
Not being able to cry meant our feeling universe had totally changed, and it threw us out of order, so that we inherited excruciating and insufferable feelings, that though not all feelings were lost, well, the ones hanging around became unbearable, and this unbearableness was shared with everyone I met, both young and old. I'm scared about what's going to happen to us as a tribe, so I haven't lost fear, but I am scared, although I'm scared in a different way now. It's not the old fear. I don't know what these new feelings are. I can't explain it because I need to figure out what this new world of feelings is. And we are standing at a new era of what it means to be human. Without crying, what have I lost? Every feeling has turned strange and cold. All I can say is that my anger is contaminated. My disgust is morose. My joy is not joy. It's something else. There's no real joy. It's more of an unmanageable type of exhilaration. When I think of it, we ignored the conundrum of feelings all our lives anyway. Now that we can't cry, we're under enormous pressure, and there's this volcano within us is ready to explode. And we have to disentangle and resolve what our new feelings are because they have become intolerable. Intolerable.
The problem was always there, but it just got covered over. A little bit of pressure came and the kettle boiled over. And now you have to sort it out, and now you have to work it out. When feelings are unbearable, you know life will drag you down. Feelings are unbearable, you know life will kick you around. Remember the former years when life was so simplistic, your ideas realistic, and now you feel you missed it, and it's hard to cope when everything is feelings unbearable. You know life will drag you down. Feelings unbearable. You know life will kick you around.
As I looked around me, the desolation and sense of helplessness was everywhere. It turned us into what appeared to be a new species, even a new civilization. Everywhere you went, and in everyone you met, there was a deep sense of loss, and no one could hide it. It felt like the city I was living in would implode at any moment, and there was a high-strung apprehension such that international relations were even very tense. No matter who you were, whether you were a doctor, a lawyer, a factory worker, or a nurse, there was no escape. One person told me they felt as if they had vanished from the earth and were waiting in an in-between state somewhere in the stratosphere. And as they walked down the aisle at their local supermarkets, they forgot whether their kid needed full cream, skim, or lactose intolerant. All this circulation of despair led people to kill themselves. Would crying again prevent this affliction? In December 2091, there descended upon the earth the most bizarre transformation called the blank stare phenomenon. It was indiscriminate and affected people from all walks of life, including fetuses. My daughter Stephanie was visited by this disease. It was as if she had gone. At times she stared in such a way that she saw right through me and people around her. It was upsetting. What she could see in people even scared her. Sometimes when she saw the real thoughts of other people, it would overwhelm her, and when they saw that she knew what they knew, they ran from her. A stare can last for hours, even days, and somehow she can continue normal activities while in its grasp. And the depth of the stare also varies from very light to extremely heavy. I was horrified to watch the complexity of designs slowly appear on her forehead, triangular, circular, rectangular, semicircular shapes. I watched as she lost some of the hair until the hairline on the forehead was further back, which gave a balding effect. When Stephanie went into the blank stare, she described it as going to somewhere completely different from what she had known, and she couldn't control it. It was as if a strong wind was blowing her along, and she was gone again. I was a parent forced to be a witness to a heinous crime on my own flesh and blood.
Baby, you're gone again, blowing with the wind. Baby, you're gone again, blowing with the wind. Oh. Just when I get to know you, just when I get to trust you, just when I get to hold you, just when I get to love you. Oh baby, you're gone again, blowing with the wind. I say, baby, you're gone again, blowing with the wind.
Another manifestation from the fallout of the day the world stopped crying was a disorder called by psychiatrists and psychologists the psychotic aspect, which they claimed had developed after April 2091. Characteristics of the psychosis were kleptoparanoia and phobic vanishing. It affected about 12% of the population randomly across all age groups. There was serious debate as to whether these people were more prone to this disorder than others. And the sufferers exhibit a constant belief that people, governments, spirits, animals, objects, even extraterrestrial beings were seeking to steal everything and everything they were connected to, from clothes to cars to houses to makeup to body parts to names and even to who they were as people. It was hard to converse with them as they always appeared distracted or on the lookout. Some of them believed that their connections would vanish in front of them in the blink of an eye. They looked as if they were constantly patrolling the 360 degrees personal space around them. One such person was a 10-year-old girl from Malaysia called Noor. Overhearing her parents discussing her paranoid psychosis in the other room, she approached her mother and asked, on the 3rd of June, 2093, the UN asked me to become World Cry Coordinator. Now, after some intense workshops, the like of which had never been seen before, experts agreed on recommendations to confront this disease inflicting itself on humanity. So much pressure had been placed on our shoulders to come up with an answer while the world waited. But out of these discussions, something was beginning to manifest. It came in the form of a 100-day proposal. The program's policies were suggesting that governments everywhere on Earth consider the 100-day strategies, and that the goal is stimulating the possibility of people being able to cry once more. Now, during each of these 100 days, if there was anyone in the whole world who cried, ultra-sensitive satellites hosted and created by the United Nations would pinpoint their whereabouts, and this would allow us to track down the person or persons in question. Now, you'd have noticed each strategy has reasons behind the approach. So the first 100 days is serve your neighbor. The theme is serve your neighbor, serve the poor. And the rationale was that we have neglected our neighbor and the plight of the poor, and if we serve them, we might become truly human again and cry. Now, the second 100 days was the theme of prayer, fasting, and meditation or reflection. And the rationale was maybe we've lost touch with the universe, and this may help us cry again, or maybe we had taken the sacred for granted. And the third 100 days was technological blackout, including necessary technology. And the rationale for this is that we have become addicted to technology, and we use it as a distraction from pain, and we need to abstain from it for a while. So, these were the 3 100-day strategies, and the Earth set about fulfilling their requirements. On July the 1st, 2093, the first 100 days began with serving the poor. According to UN information, the 100 days was really taking off all across the world, and it was consistent on what I was seeing and hearing on international media. It didn't mean we were going to resolve the world's extreme issues like getting rid of poverty and starvation, gender equality, education, child mortality, and so on. It simply meant that we were going to give whatever we could to help people within a set time frame. The hope was that this would be a springboard for change. And I have to say, for governments all over to drop everything and concentrate on serving people is inconceivable in human history. I mean, this in itself was encouraging. It was amazing. Why didn't this happen before? Africa was inundated with money which went directly to the poor, none of it diverted. This was the giving earth, and it was working marvelously. You should have seen the smiles. It was something to behold. In every neighborhood, it was, like a beggar in Calcutta who was being interviewed on the screen. She had enough money now to rent an apartment for 10 years. A homeless man in New York now owned his own place in downtown Manhattan because some generous billionaires banded together. Whole villages in South America had enough money to never go hungry. It was truly magnificent. And at the close of the 100 days, no one was picked up crying by UN satellites around the earth. Well, everyone was massively disappointed. At the same time, we were trying to save the world, and we were thankful there were 2 more attempts ahead of us at saving it. And one consolation was that for the first time in human history, most individuals were united with the poor. On the 1st of November 2093, the second strategy to stimulate the earth to cry once more began. We began prayer, fasting, and meditation. Religious leaders were speaking with quiet confidence. They believed they would see the world cry again through their gods, spirits, angels, prophets, gurus, sages, prayers, chanting, faith, meditations, and spirituality. One leader in London said, "It's a no-brainer. God is listening and will respond. You'll see." Another one said, "There is good karma on a massive scale. God cannot and will not leave us to suffer like this." While another said, there will be an outpouring of the Spirit and many people will see the miracle and will become spiritually oriented. Some were very outspoken, and there were some who were, more audacious in their approach. God will show the world how it's done. He's the boss. He's the one in charge. As I myself hit the floor on bended knees, there were billions of other knees doing the same on every continent. Wherever you went throughout the world, the streets were full of people crying out to the God of their understanding to help the earth weep once more. It was an air of desperation on earth that we'd not seen. Millions of candles stood burning in churches around the world, so much so there was a concern the churches would burn down. Worship occurred beyond the churches, the mosques and temples, in hospitals. They worshipped in the beds, in the hallways, in the operating theaters, in the toilets, in the food courts, in the staff rooms. People were still doing their shopping. They still played sport. They still went to restaurants and coffee shops. But in those spaces, they worshiped and they pleaded to God for help. It was something to see someone ask for a coffee and then launch into, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven."
I used to steal, how I used to steal, and I used to lie, oh how I used to lie, but the past has been buried, it's all been buried, it's all been buried in an old church stone. I used to hate, oh how I used to hate, and I used to fight, how I used to fight, but it's all been buried, the past has been buried, it's all been buried in an old church.
So it was with profound disappointment to the UN and the rest of the world that 100 days came and went with no success. Therefore, the first 200-day strategy seemed like a bad dream, beginning with the response to the world's poor, which was encouraging, but nobody cried. And people felt they had risked much with no return. And the same with the 100 Days of Prayer. March 1st, 2094, we were going to go from a world drenched in artificial intelligence to 100 days of no technology. June 16th, rumors began circulating about Dilfeska, a teenager from Uzbekistan who was possibly the first person on the planet who cried. I was told by the United Nations to track her down for the purposes of confirming their satellite insight and bringing her back to UN headquarters to learn if she could become a catalyst for a worldwide crying awakening. The UN granted me 12 close protection officers, and we were given a special dispensation to carry out this clandestine appointment, which meant we could break the rules of no technology on behalf of saving the world. Common sense overrode law. Now, at last, we may have been staring at the beginnings of a road to crying. This was our chance. There probably wasn't going to be a second time around.
1 minute I was in the womb, and then I stepped outside. Mother held me to her breast and said, just enjoy the ride. She said, life is a roller coaster, it has its ups and downs, so enjoy the time you have, 'cause there ain't no second time round. There ain't no second time round. There ain't no second time round.
So I went to Dilfeska's house in the village with the 12 officers spread throughout the area. The whole village was in utter darkness. I was accompanied by an interpreter named Ibrahim, and we had illuminants to guide us in the pitch dark. We investigated Dilfeska's house, but no one was there. And we walked to Dilfeska's neighbors, knocked. Abdulaziz and his wife Chinara were both at home. As we sipped tea, it became apparent they weren't going to budge, and the silences were hard to bear. As we were sitting there in a stalemate, 6 people burst into the room in anti-searing uniforms with guns and illuminants in their hands. And one of them said to me, Shiloh, well, if it isn't the planet saver himself. I realized it was a woman called Sunday, her partner Charlie, and 4 other men I didn't know. Sunday and Charlie had become part of the N group, which began in 2072. And many of them had been friends of mine, but we became wary of each other. The N group became convinced it was a matter of time before climate would bring down the Earth through a natural and logical progression. Now, this position was hard to argue with, since the Earth was and is sweltering. At the core of their belief system was the idea that the world needs to end to renew itself. The N in N group is short for nihilist, and they had an itch to destroy. Their target was the program. They'd worked tirelessly on discrediting the UN, and some UN workers had mysteriously disappeared. For them, there were signs the world was on the cusp of oblivion. The climate calamity was pushing us to the precipice, while the inability to cry would finish the job. And for the N group, 2093 was the time to apply pressure. They were determined to get rid of anything which stood in their way. After months of organizing themselves, they were at the forefront of a great rebellion which was then taking place to bring down anyone who may cry. In other words, they were happy the world had stopped crying, and they wanted to keep it that way because they believed it was a sign of the destruction to come. So they were constantly on the lookout for anyone who showed signs of crying in any shape or form. Charlie said to me, "Oh, don't worry about the 12 people who were protecting you, Shiloh. They are, shall we say, no more." I didn't see how that was possible. My heart sank. "Now tell me, my friend," Charlie said to me, "which one is Ibrahim, the one you hired, and which one is Abdulaziz?" the man who knows where Dilfeska is. I am Ibrahim, said Ibrahim. Sunday then walked toward him and held a gun against Abdulaziz's head and turned to face Ibrahim. Tell him I will give him 10 seconds before I blow his head off, unless, of course, he tells me where she is. Are you crazy, Sunday? Charlie said. Don't do this way. It won't get us the girl. This wasn't part of the plan. Tell him I'm going to give him 10. But the interpreter hesitated. He looked at the man and then said, Tell him. So the interpreter told him. They began in sync. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Abdulaziz spilt the beans, and the next thing you know, we were piling into a bus, and off we went to a cave in the mountains where Dilfeska was hiding. Sunday's intent was to find out what made Dilfeska cry and to take that information back to N Group for future reference, which might help them deal with any others who may cry. After obtaining this knowledge, the plan was to kill Dilfeska. We arrived at the cave. With guns and illuminants in hand, their guards flushed out Dilfeska with loud, murderous threats. Because a moment later, a shoe poked out from behind the front wall of the cave, and stepping forward was the girl. She stood directly in front of us. She was tall and skinny, with long black hair and a thick yellow coat, a long red dress down to her ankles with gold bells on her brown shoes. She looked at everyone in a blank, staring gaze. Standing further behind her were her parents. When Sunday walked towards her, she stood in front of her and pointed the illuminant towards the blank stare. Before a word could come out of Sunday's mouth, Sunday seemed to panic. She moved backwards, ordering the others to step back. The girl stood alone with Sunday's illuminant focused on her in the distance. Sunday took Ibrahim aside and whispered to him, "Maybe you could speak to her." So Ibrahim began talking to Dilfeska in Uzbek. She wanted to know who all the people were. So Ibrahim told her the names of each person in the group. And after concluding this conversation, he said, Dilfeska says the following. Firstly, I am a child. Why are you treating me like this? And secondly, I am afraid. When I asked her why she was afraid, she clammed up and stared at the ground. Sunday called out to Ibrahim, "Tell her I need to know what made her cry." To everyone's surprise, except her parents, the child responded in English. "I can only tell Sunday and Shiloh back in the cave." "How do you know Shiloh? And how do you know English?" Sunday said. "My teacher was Susanna, and she taught me English. She read Shiloh's books, and she gave me one of them. She loved his ideas." Sunday turned to the group and said, "I want the guards to stand outside the cave while the girl and I and Shiloh go inside." The group did as she said and filed out of the cave. Past a crack inside the cave with the gun in one hand and an illuminant in the other. Sunday didn't waste any time and moved her forefingers back and forth, signaling the girl to speak. The girl slowly turned around and began whispering to the back of the cave as if she was talking to someone. She seemed lost in conversation and then slowly turned around again to face Sunday. And Sunday says, "Who are you talking to?" And Dilfeska says, "My friends." "Which friends? Does it matter?" "Yes, it does matter. Who do you think you are? Now, who are your friends?" "My friends in my mind." "Listen, girl, they may be your friends in your mind for a very short time. They have told me what to say to you." "Like what?" "They said you must put the gun on the ground and give me the illuminant." "The gun stays with me, but the illuminant you can have, maybe." "No, the gun must be on the ground. We have work." Look, Dilfeska, the gun stays here with me. Then I can't say the words you need to hear, Dilfeska said. There was a silence, and Sunday went to a corner and sat down for a moment or so. Came back and said, all right, okay, then look, I can see you're not going to move. You're right. Okay, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll put it under something. My friends told me there's no hiding it. Sunday walked over to Dilfeska and lifted the gun up to her lips. Dilfeska, you need to tell me what you know. No, I can't do it this way, ever. Dilfeska was audacious till death. It was time for her enemy to back down. So with every ounce of her being not wanting to follow the girl's command, Sunday forced herself to put the gun on the ground and handed over the illuminant. Dilfeska said, we need to go deep. Deep? Yes. There is something I will show you. What is it? You will see. So I must trust a small child. There is something I must show you. The girl said, come with me. And they walked to the left side of the cave, where she shone the illuminant on a protruding area of the wall. Yes, well, what are we seeing? Dilfeska gave Sunday the illuminant. Keep it on the wall, she said. And Dilfeska took a handkerchief from her pocket, spat on it, began to rub the wall. As she rubbed, writing began to appear, a large plaque. She turned the handkerchief over, spat again. Realizing she was running out of spit, she held it out to Sunday and exchanged it for the illuminant. Sunday took the handkerchief, began to spit, and when she had finished, she rubbed the plaque clean. And once it was clean, Sunday said, how did this get here? Is that a second plaque? Susanna had it made overseas and paid someone to put it up. Yes, there is one in the Uzbek and one in English. Now, I need you to read it, loud and slow. Here's the illuminant. Dilfeska stepped back, and Sunday looked at the plaque and said, it reads my take on 1 Corinthians 13. Susanna, 2089. And in a rage, Sunday turned to Dilfeska and me and said, what is this Bible crap? Let's stop right here. Dilfeska said, you need to read it, Sunday. If you want to know what you want to know, you must. Please. This is difficult. It's very, very difficult, Sunday said. So taking a deep breath and closing her eyes, she opened them and said, however, and looking up at the plaque, she began, though I am capable of being technologically savvy or of becoming a sporting legend, and though I can pray to Jesus, Buddha, Allah, Mother Earth, and to angels, I cannot grieve for myself. I am become as a sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. And though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains of doubt, obtain $1 million and a mansion with 1,000 rooms, and though I have the gift of predicting the future like when the world will end, and understand all mysteries like how the world began, but cannot grieve for myself, I am nothing. And although I can plant 1,000 trees, give my body to be killed, or donate all my money to charity, but cannot grieve for myself, it profits me nothing. Grieving for oneself creates a person who suffers long, is kind, is patient, does not envy, does not parade themselves, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek their own, is not easily provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in violence, but rejoices in peacemaking, who bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. And Sunday, sobbed and sobbed. And eventually she wiped her tears and began continuing to read. Grieving never fails. But where there is technology, it won't satisfy. Where there is sporting prowess, it will cease. And where there is knowledge, it will vanish away. Sunday was spent. With an engulfing gaze, Dilfeska began unfolding Sunday's life story from the time when she was in her mother's womb, her school years, her marriage, and intimate truths. In the womb, Dilfeska said, you were not well joined to your mother's body, and this has left you with a large hole in your healing communications with the world and with yourself. Regarding intimate truths, she said, Samantha, your first child, wants you to no longer carry the pain of her untimely death. And Sunday fell to the ground and began to sob uncontrollably. After this dissipated, Dilfeska said, I am not the one telling you these things. I do not know where they come from. Someone else is in me telling them to you. They are from a world which was, which is, and which is to come. Now this earth is in trouble, Sunday. The earth is lost from pain. Sunday, it has gone to places far away, away from the center. For this, it cannot cry anymore. It is cold, Sunday. You are cold. Why do you seek to kill a child who was born in light? Why do you desire murder? Strength began to leave Sunday, and she dropped the illuminant from her finger. And she slept. Dilfeska called out to me, Shiloh! I stood before her, and she took me through the same process that Sunday had gone through. When we had finished, I was exhausted too, and lay down and slept. Later, Dilfeska woke us up. Shiloh and Sunday, we have to get to the wound. From soft to loud to shouting, I want you to say with me, it is okay to grieve for myself, Sunday. It is okay to grieve for myself, Shiloh. Now you can take over. Sunday began and I followed. It is okay to grieve for myself, Sunday. It is okay to grieve for myself, Shiloh. It is okay to grieve for myself, Sunday. It is okay to grieve for myself, Shiloh. It is okay to grieve for myself, Sunday. It is okay to grieve for myself, Shiloh. It is okay to grieve for myself, Sunday. It is okay to grieve for myself, Shiloh. And when we had shouted the eighth chant, we fell to the ground. With all her strength, Sunday reached out, took her gun, and crawled out of the cave. She went outside to face the group. She called the guards and Charlie over, and they had a long discussion, which eventually became heated, but died down till they went along with Sunday's madness. Sunday's always been persuasive. And she went over and dropped the gun at Ibrahim's feet and said, do what you want with me. Ibrahim, knowing what he must do, walked past Sunday and went headlong into the cave. Dilfeska was standing there still, and I was in the corner. Ibrahim said to her, can you help me? Dilfeska looked back at him for several moments and then began to cry. What's wrong, child? Well, she looked up at Ibrahim and said, I'm hungry, and I need to go to the toilet. Ibrahim was embarrassed. He wasn't expecting her to be so human. He felt foolish and had deep compassion for her, and he said, of course, child, I'll be back with some food and paper. No, she said, I have food and paper. You must wait for me. And Dilfeska disappeared. When she came back, Ibrahim and I watched as she sat down and ate. Ibrahim marveled at her power, her truthfulness, her sincerity, and her clairvoyance, seeing Sunday's transformation and in the stately way she presented herself to the group. Ibrahim whispered to me, "Can she help me, this child, barely 18 years of age? Will she do for me what she did for you and Sunday?" "I am ready," Dilfeska said. She led Ibrahim to the plaque, and he read Susanna's poem. And it seemed that Dilfeska was repeating the process she followed with Sunday and me. She began talking prophetically to Ibrahim about his life's trajectory. And after that, Dilfeska and Ibrahim began to chant. And at the end of the chant, Ibrahim fell to the ground, like Sunday and me, exhausted. And eventually he walked back to the group. Now, this same process continued with each member of the group until everyone, including the guards, cried once more. When the last person was liberated, they all slept in the cave, safe and content. And when they woke, they heard the pitter-patter of rain. Each of Dilfeska's disciples had only one thing in their mind now: saving the rest of the world through the domino effect. We had become a community of love in what seemed like the twinkling of an eye.
The community of love is a paradise so rare to find. The community of love is like discovering a diamond mine. Real riches are discovered there. Real truth, real lives, real friends who care. Who care?
The young Dilfeska, her parents, the four guards, Ibrahim, Sunday, Charlie, Abdulaziz, and his wife, Chinara, they're all sleeping downstairs in the basement right now. With the help of the UN, our tight-knit little group of grievers from Uzbekistan were able to escape by plane to Mount Tamborine, Australia. In a few hours, they'll be stirring. We'll need to think about where we go from here. UN headquarters will have to wait for the time being, and the N group is going to track us down at some point. This morning, I finished this recording with something from the beginning. The question of whether the young of this generation will be free. I've spoken about the unthinkable cryinglessness, the journey everyone is on, unbearable feelings, suicide, my daughter, gone again. Noor from Malaysia, serving the poor in prayer and disappointment and no technology. But one thing is certain. Through Dilfeska, the young of today are now staring at the possibility of flying to freedom. And this group on the mountain has created a transformation through grieving their wounds together. I am convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt there is a positive force in this universe staring us all in the face. It is conclusive, explicit, indisputable, and undeniable.